Hello, this is Joe Peters from MOMFIT with Joe Peters. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network and H.E.R Network on Single TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Single TV app in the respective app stores, iOS and Android devices. While you are downloading, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Single TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, and Fire TV Sticks, Roku and Roku Sticks in all smart TVs since 2016. Welcome to today's episode. I am very excited to be talking about this topic because it's one of those topics, especially now that we are having so much things going on and then in the United States we're having some formula shortage. I wanted to take the time to actually talk a little bit about breastfeeding and the breastfeeding journey. Uh, One of the things that is important for all of you mamas that are either pregnant or have a newborn is that you have clear what are your goals and what is your desire on how to feed your baby. And there are three specific ways that you can feed your baby. You can exclusively breastfeed, and that exclusively breastfeed can be done in two different ways. You can exclusively breastfeed baby in your breast, directly breastfeed, or you can exclusively breastfeed pumping and just feeding your baby a bottle with your pump milk. Both of them are considered exclusively breastfeeding. We are going to talk about when you can pick one or the other. Then the second one is do what we say a combo of mix between your breast milk, either directly from the breast or pumped, and formula. And how that is called usually is supplementing with Formula. So you have some food, some feeding from your breast milk, and then you supplement your baby with formula. And then the third option is feeding your baby with formula 100% of the time. And one of the things that I want to talk with you before I share more the details on my experience and my journey in breastfeeding is that this is a topic where we all as moms need to get working together and align and start removing the need and the room for judgment and criticize, because the most important thing is baby fed is number one priority. So no matter what of those three different options of feeding you choose, if you are feeding your baby, you are rocking it, mama. You are not a better mom or a less better mom or a not better mom if you choose one or the other. Actually, one of our guests in the past was actually telling us how much things are changing now, because in the 50s and the 40s and 50s, actually doctors were not encouraging moms to breastfeed. They actually were sending moms with formula from the hospital, and that was all promoted and sponsored by food, formula manufacturers that were trying to push into the formula. And even now, there is a lot more support into formula than what it is on breastfeeding. And I'm not saying that one is better than the other one. I'm saying that my desire for you is that you have the tools, the knowledge, and the wisdom to actually make a choice with all the information available, with the whole picture of what is going on. And that is something that we are working day in and day out to actually bring the same amount of attention and support that we have for formula fed babies into breastfeeding babies, and that every mom know their options, their possibilities, and how to reach out for specific support. Actually, in a couple of episodes, we are going to have one of the guest speakers is going to be an ICBL, International um, Lactation Consultant. And they are around the world and they specialize in feeding and breastfeeding and helping you with your journey. Why that is important? And this is something that I'm going to be very clear with everybody that is listening to the show. I don't have anything against pediatricians. I think that pediatricians are one of our best team members in the team that is supporting our journey as mothers and our babies. But I also want you to know that pediatricians only have 9 to 12 hours total or education on breastfeeding when they are doing medical school. Why I'm sharing that? Because when a pediatrician give you feedback on feeding, they are not they are not the best person to give you advice because they don't have all the knowledge and the wisdom. Usually they are giving you advice as their personal choice or their personal opinion versus back up with science and with medicine. That is why it's very important that we all get in touch with an ICBLC, a lactation consultant, that we get that part in the process of understanding our journey as moms. If you are considering to breastfeed, and even if you are not considering to breastfeed, if you are considering to fully pump, if you are considering to go back to work and feeding your baby, one of the best gifts that you can have is actually allowing yourself to get a consultation with an ICBLC while you are pregnant, so you can actually review all your options, review what will be better for you and your baby. They are going to be one of the most amazing assets in your journey as a mom and journey feeding your baby. So that will be all the overall that I want to give you on that. And then I want to share with you my personal experience as everything that I learned through my journey as a breastfeeding mom. When I was pregnant, I had very clear that my desire was breastfeeding my baby as much and as long as possible. I was hearing that I did research and I found that the WHO recommends breastfeeding at least for the first full year and ideally up to 2 years. And then, based on the benefits of the breast milk in the child development and in the child life, and because of that, I just assumed that I was going to be in that ballpark between 1 year and 2 years. And the sad part that happened to a lot of moms and happened to me is we think that breastfeeding is just natural, like being pregnant. Like you don't have to do anything to be pregnant, and you don't need to do anything for your baby to grow and develop, right? You just need to nourish yourself well, eat well, have your vitamins, and then the body does the same, does the rest. And then I thought, like many other moms think, that breastfeeding was the same. That was something natural. And then I was going to have my baby. My baby was going to latch, get on my boobies, and start eating. And then we will start our breastfeeding journey for the next 12, 18, 24 months. One thing that I didn't realize back then was that breastfeeding is natural and is not easy. And that is unfortunately a truth that is not shared very often. We don't hear much about how many moms struggle breastfeeding. And because of that, when we face the struggles, we tend to actually think that that was not meant for us, and then we tend to, based on all the other options, to give up sometimes too soon to what something that we want to do, because we just think that is that we are one of the few ones that is having issues with breastfeeding, when the reality is the vast majority of moms had some kind of issue while they are breastfeeding. And that is what happened to me. When my baby was born July 17 at 12:15 a.m. in the morning. My baby latched, and I had a couple of people reviewing it, and it was a little uncomfortable, but there was not any worry. Ideally, your milk, when your baby just come in, you are not producing milk, you are producing colostrum. And colostrum is a dense liquid that is the preparation for the milk, and it's a dense liquid that had a lot of nutrients that the baby needs in their first couple of days. And when your baby is born, you're going to be producing colostrum for 2 to 3, 4 days. And then between day 3 and 5, your milk will come in. You will start changing from colostrum to milk, and then the milk will start coming in. Why that is important? Because the colostrum is very small quantity, very rich on nutrients. That is good when your baby's a newborn, because when your baby's a newborn, your baby's stomach is the size of a little pea, a little cherry. So your baby doesn't need a lot of food the first couple of days. Your baby needs a tiny little bit to actually be functioning. But as the babies start growing and the babies start growing really fast, the stomach of the baby start growing too. By day five, around day five, the baby's stomach is a little bigger, and then it will need around an ounce of milk. Um, and what happened was, I came home, I was feeding the baby, he was fussy, he was a little crying, he will stay in the breast for a long time, fall asleep, then woke up, stay in the breast. I actually was staying on the breast 20 minutes on each side. So I was feeding the baby for 40 minutes. He will stay 20 minutes and then 20 minutes in the other side. And I did that thinking that everything was perfect until day 6 or 7, when we went for his first checkup. Because in the United States, and I know that in different countries this is different, but in the United States, you are supposed to go and check your baby within the first week of your baby being alive, being born. So we went to the pediatrician, and then the pediatrician put the baby in the scale. And then that was at the moment where my entire life changed, because the feedback of the pediatrician was that my baby was losing weight, and that lost 10% of his body weight. Babies, when they are born with a lot of liquid that they have in the stomach, that they have because they are inside the mommy, and then they lose weight. But then within the first week, they are supposed to gain back that weight and be at least at the level of birth weight. And my baby was not gaining that weight. My baby was still uh, losing weight. And talking about a pediatrician not being completely prepared on breastfeeding, I thank him because he was very worried about my baby, and he didn't have the right tools and the right skills to actually deal with me as a first time mom that was worried about my baby and me. Because that is what is the one thing that we do with our babies, with our newborns: feed them, right? My job was feeding him. And hearing that he was not gaining weight, I immediately started thinking, okay, what is going on, what is wrong? And then he shared that he want us to start supplementing with formula, and start pumping. And initially he said that some moms take a little longer to have milk, and that he want to just have a plan. And then he said that my baby was starving. And that was one of the most difficult things that ever happened to me, because that crushed my heart, that crushed my mind. Then I remember saying, well, but he's falling asleep in the breast. So, and then the pediatrician said, well, he's falling asleep in the breast because he's working so hard and he's not getting enough milk, that he's just sleeping, shutting down to reserve his energy. And that broke my mama heart in thousand pieces. I start crying, and then I also was feeling so frustrated that was not even in the horizon. I was not even prepared for that option, because I always thought that it would be as simple as putting my baby on the breast and feed, and that was it. So I came home and we start researching. I was aware that there is a big movement about nipple confusion, and how sometimes when you start interacting baby with bottle and nipple, the baby start preferring the bottle, and that make the journey of breastfeeding even shorter. So I talked with my husband, said, okay, we need to supplement with the formula, but we are going to actually do it with a syringe. And instead of a bottle, we are going to breastfeed. And then after that, we are going to pump. And then after that, we are going to give him formula in a syringe. I was blessed enough that one of my closest friend had a close friend that is an ICBLC. And even when she was super booked and busy, because I was a friend of her friend, she found the time to come and see me and work with me. She came to my house, we sit down, we talk about it, and then I started learning the reality about breastfeeding. So the first thing was she explained that baby fed is first, and then that we need to supplement an ounce of breast milk every feeding. One of the things that I didn't knew then was that that is everything that my baby was needing. So I was actually giving him extra, trying to compensate how much was having he was having from my breast. And then we create a plan for my breast. So the first priority always is that your baby's fed, and then the second priority is protecting the supply, protecting your supply, because your breast milk, your breastfeeding journey is completely linked and attached to how much is extracting. So it's like the most basic economical approach: offer and demand, offer and demand. So if you're not having a lot of a demand of milk, your body will not produce enough. So the second priority is always trying to protect the supply. Then we get in a plan to do what is called a triple feeding. A triple feeding is you feed your baby with the breast, then you supplement the baby with formula, and then you pump to keep activating your your mammalian glandules and start producing more milk. And then that triple feeding is exhausting because the baby needs to eat around every 3 hours, right? And my baby was actually not gaining weight. So I didn't have the luxury of some moms that are gaining weight of letting them sleep a little longer. I had to wake up my baby every 3 hours. So I will wake up my baby every 3 hours. Then I will breastfeed him 40 minutes, 20 minutes, and 20 minutes. And then I will feed him with a syringe. That will take a little time because it was weird. He was a tiny little bit and we were trying to put a syringe on him. And then I will have to pump for another 20 minutes. So that itself was always an hour and 15 minutes. And then he will fall asleep and I had to wake him up 2 hours later. So I was actually, instead of sleeping 2 hours, 2 hours and a half, I was sleeping an hour and 30 minutes each time. And then I will have to restart the process and restart the process. And that was really, really rough. But as we start pumping, my breast milk start coming in. Actually, my breast milk came around 10, 11 days after my baby was born, when the average is between 3 and 5. So it was almost twice as long. And when I started researching, I found out that that is more common than what we think. A lot of moms get a late um, milk coming in. Is very common. But the problem is we don't talk about it. It's not available. The information is not available to us. Or when it happened to us, we just think, oh, there is something wrong with me. My milk is not coming. I need to go for another alternative. So after a week of doing that triple feeding, we were exhausted. My husband was exhausted. I was exhausted. We went to the doctor. The baby's gaining weight. We are doing good. We were starting to see a little bit more of milk on the pump. But we knew that the syringe was not something sustainable. And my husband was really tired, saying, like, why we don't make it a little easier with a bottle? And I was really scared of the bottle. So we went back with the lactation consultant, discussed the options, and then she introduced me to this amazing product that I think that every breastfeeding mom should know about and have access to, and that is an SNS, supplementing nursing system. And what it is a little container where you can put either you can put your pump milk, and you actually had a tube coming from that container that you tape into your chest, into your breast, and then you put the tip of that you put the tip of the supplementing system right at the edge of the nipple. So when the baby latch on the nipple, and the tube that is supplementing milk. So the baby is eating the external milk coming, dropping from the tube, and is at the same time sucking and extracting and activating our mammalian glands and our breast. So then that was a great option. It's not very easy to find, so it took us a couple of days. We finally ordered it, and then we started the journey of learning how to use it, because he had two tubes. And again, there is not a lot of information about it. There's not a lot of videos about it. There was a lot of research, try and error, trying to do it. The baby will, because the baby had some latching issue, the baby will get out of the breast, and then the milk from the tube will be just spreading all over. And then I was freaking out because that was my precious milk that it took me so hard to pump. It was very rough. It was very rough. And in hindsight, I could choose to just go to formula. And I want to tell all of you that there is not a good or bad decision. At that time, that was a decision, but at that time, I was choosing to be determined into doing everything that I could to breastfeed my baby, especially after I learned that it will take up to 12, 16 weeks for your milk to mature and get stable. So in those hard first couple of weeks, first 2, 3 weeks, what I did was say, okay, I'm gonna do everything that I can for the next 12 weeks. And if by week 12, where the milk is stable by science data, I'm still not being able to um, breastfeed as I want, then I will explore other options. That was my personal choice. I'm saying that that was the right choice for everybody. That was the right choice for me. And at the same time, I also want you to know that it's important that you follow your instinct and you follow your heart. Because I had so many people, even my closest friends, were actually giving me their opinion that I was pushing too hard, that I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, on the baby, on my husband, that it would be easier to go into a bottle, that it would be easier to get another route. And yeah, it could be, but then I still was true to what my gut was telling me and what my instinct was telling me and what I want to do. And what I wanted to do was to make sure that I was able to breastfeed. So we started the SNS, and then the baby was gaining weight and still was not at the right pace. So the lactation consultant came back and we reviewed how much I was pumping, and then I was pumping enough. This is another thing that I want you to know, because every time that I make a reel about this goes viral, because so many moms compare themselves with the overproducers of social media. When you go into social media and see people that are pumping, you see people that are pumping 5, 6, 8 ounces of milk. And then when you pump and you only are having 1 ounce, half of an ounce and a half, you start feeling defeated and you start saying like, oh my gosh, I'm not giving my baby enough because I'm comparing myself with that. So I want to pause there and be very clear with you. When those people that show that amount of milk are showing that amount of milk, is for one or two reasons. The first one is they are pumping instead of a feeding. So for example, if we have a feeding every 3 hours, so we have a feeding at 9 a.m., then another one at 12, then another one at 3. They can feed the baby on the breast at 9. Then at 12, instead of feeding the baby on the breast, they pump. So they have everything that the baby will be eating and a little bit more. And then they feed the baby again at 3 o'clock. So that is the first reason. So the first thing that you can ask any person that is showing you a lot of milk in their pumping is, are you pumping in addition to feeding the baby, or you are pumping instead of a feeding session? That's number one. Number two, when you are pumping in between feeding sessions, for example, the same example, you feed at 9 a.m. and then you're going to feed at noon again. If in between that, around an hour, around 10 a.m., you pump, the average normal outcome of breast milk is between zero point 0.5 and 2 ounces combined between the two breasts. Because if you think about it, it makes sense. Your baby already ate, your baby already take everything that he or she need, and then when you are pumping is completely emptying the breast to activate to produce even more. And that was important for me, because when she explained that, we pump and I was pumping around half an ounce, 1 ounce. So at that point, she said, I am not worried about your supply anymore. Your supply is good. You are making and producing enough milk for your baby. Now we need to start reviewing and considering if the baby is having any physical constraints to actually make the transfer effective. Because you can have enough milk that if the baby mouth and tongue are not able to suck properly from the breast and the nipple, then you are going to have weight issues and transfer issues. And that is something that is more common than we believe once again. And that is some babies had either tongue tie or lip tie or both. And that is that when they are born, the tissue that attach their upper lip with their top teeth, with their mandibula in the bottom, is a little too tight, so they don't have an option to move their lip properly. And the same with the tongue, the tissue that attach the tongue to the bottom side of the face sometimes is very tight, so they cannot move the tongue completely up and down, and that impact the sucking. So we look into that, and then become another adventure because there are different types of tie release. And I will actually recommend you, if you need to get an assess on tie release, don't the pediatrician is not capable to do an assessment because they are not trained to assess. So I hear a lot of time people that say, "Oh, my pediatrician said that he doesn't have tongue ties or lip ties." The pediatrician is not the right person to assess. Your ICBLC is not the right person to assess because they cannot diagnose. The right person is a pediatric dentist. And then with those pediatric dentists, there are two kinds of procedures that can be released. One is with scissors; they just cut the tissue, and the other one is with laser. And my preference is, if you need to explore that, is go with the laser because it's a little less intrusive. They have a little less of blood and heal a little better. We went for the appointment. We have to drive an hour for the appointment. We went to do the appointment when my baby was 6 weeks old. So from week 0 to week 6, we are been doing the triple feeding. We were feeding the nest, and then by then, and pumping. By then, I was not supplementing with formula because my pediatrician, on week 3, after the weight started increasing, my pediatrician said, "Okay, you don't have to keep doing formula. You can do just pumping and supplementing with your own formula with the SNS." And that itself create some anxiety and stress in myself, because the other big part that happened with breastfeeding moms that had any breastfeeding issues is that we need to also heal and repair and get back that confidence that we are doing enough, that what we are doing is correct, that what we are doing is going to support our baby, because we have that fear of, at the beginning of their life, we were not doing it right and we were impacting them completely. So we went to the pediatrician, to the dentist pediatrician, and evidently my baby had both lip tie and tongue tie. And we decided to revise it right there. So they take the baby, and that is another thing that I want you to know. They take a baby, they don't let the parents go usually, because the baby cry and they want it will be more traumatic for the parent than for the baby. They numb the baby's mouth, and then with laser they just cut the tissue in the tongue and the lip, and they bring back the baby. All that takes 2 minutes. That I want to let you know, mama, that for you, like for me, were the two longest minutes in my life. And then as soon as that came, they bring your baby back, you put your baby in breast, and then your baby suits with you. Then after that, you need for the next 2 or 3 weeks to exercise in the mouth of the baby to make sure that the tissue don't heal back close. Also to start activating that your baby relearn how to suck, because for the last 6 weeks, my baby, and even in the womb, my baby was sucking with those restrictions. So he was sucking the best that he could with those restrictions. And then now that he didn't have those restrictions, he had to learn to do that. And then that is how my husband and I work. My husband was the one doing the exercises, and every time that we feed him, we will do the exercises and move the tissue. And within a week or two, we went from 20 minutes in each breast to actually 10 minutes in each breast. So we went from 40 minutes total to 20 minutes total. We cut it on half immediately as soon as he was able to suck better and transfer better. He was more efficient taking the milk in. So that itself gave us some relief because now instead of sleeping only an hour and a half, an hour, we were starting to move into sleeping closer to 2 hours. Sometimes, if I was very lucky, 2 hours and a half, because we were just feeding him for 20 minutes. The SNS was at the same time. So he was feeding with the SNS, and then I was pumping for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then go to bed. So that itself helped. And then my baby start gaining weight and getting better. And at that time, one of the things that happened, and then I want to let you know that, is people are going to talk and people are going to assume things. One of the things that happened with baby E was that even with the ties release, and even with all the work that we did for him, he still had a very shallow latch. What is a shallow latch? A shallow latch is your baby mouth is supposed to get completely covering the nipple and the breast. So it has to have a big open mouth that it almost take it completely and cover it to have a better latch, and to have more comfort. My baby never was able to relearn how to do that. My baby learned how to be a lot more efficient in the breast, but my baby latch was still very shallow. Very shallow is that my baby latch is always very close to the nipple. And whenever people see my videos and see me breastfeeding, people immediately jump into say, "Ooh, that is painful. That is your baby is not eating. Your baby is using you as a pacifier. That is painful." And the reality is, it's not painful. It's not painful for me. I'm not saying there could be moms that is painful for, and there are other things that those moms could do, like nipple shields and other options. But for me, was not painful, and he was actually eating. So we keep doing that, and then we get to a point where around 3 months old, we start talking about the option of not doing the SNS anymore and stop pumping. And that was more the mindset and the mental load of me as a mom to be feel confident in my own skills, to be confident in my own milk enough to stop doing the supplemental SNS, to stop pumping, because my baby was having enough from my breast. And it take me several weeks, several months, take me almost 2 3 months for me to not be hyper vigilant and weighing the baby and tracking my feedings every 3 hours, so I can start gaining that confidence that I was doing the right thing, that my baby had everything that he need, that we were doing everything that we need, um, that we were everything, that he had everything that he need. And the reality is, um, it's a journey. It's a journey, and actually, I stopped the SNS around month 3. Yeah, around month 3. And then last week we celebrate 10 months. No, last week, no, 2 weeks ago, we celebrate 10 months of exclusively breastfeeding. And I am sharing this story with all of you because I want you to know that there are always options. I want one of my jobs as a coach of my moms is always make them feel that there is an option, that there is something that you could do, that there is something that you could ask for, that there are always alternatives. I never want a mom that want to be breastfeeding to feel hopeless and feel that she doesn't have other options that turn into formula. If you are going to be going into formula, I want you to do it because that make you feel empowered and make you feel that that is the right decision for you and your baby and your family.
not because you feel that you don't have other option and that you were not able to breastfeed. That is what you want. That is what I'm sharing this, because I'm sharing you a journey that was extremely painful, that that we were able to move into. And yeah, Barbara is saying we ex who. um I would love for you to expand a little bit more on that one. But a journey that show us that we are going in a marathon, like I always say. And then with that marathon, it's important that we always have the right support, that we always have the right team around us, and that we always know that we can support ourselves, that we can support ourselves with everything that is happening with our journey as moms, as new moms, and in our journey on breastfeeding. So part of what I want to do with all of you today was sharing my journey and sharing that it was not an easy journey. And then one of the things that I learned with that journey was that breastfeeding is easy as walking. Breastfeeding is not easy as breathing. And I want you to actually write that down. And if you're a mom to be or a new mom, to remember that, because society is being putting us in the thoughts that we should just, that should be as easy as breathing. And it's not as easy as breathing. It's easy as walking. Eventually, and I will tell you, like, it's easy as breathing will be the first thing that a baby does when it was born. Breathe, and never had to worry about it ever again in his life or her life, because it's natural, it goes automatic. And breastfeeding is not like that. Breastfeeding is more about, as easy as walking is, it requires some time, it requires some effort. It requires the baby to first start crawling and then start pulling up, and then starting to feel comfortable only on his legs, and then eventually start doing some steps and walking and waggling and toddling. And then as soon as after that process is done, when start walking, then it doesn't have to think about it ever again, because we become natural. And that is a message that I want to share with all of you. Don't put too much pressure on yourself thinking that breastfeeding should be as easy as breathing. It is easy, but it's easy as walking. Normally, for over 70% of the moms, it requires some work, it requires some effort, it requires you to actually see different alternatives. And then, if is something that is important for you, that is something that you want to have, that is something that you want to accomplish, then as you work on it, you are going to get better and better until it's automatic. And now I will tell you, I can look back 10 months ago, and it's amazing to me that my baby was taking 40 minutes to eat when he was that tiny. Because now, when I'm nursing, my baby will eat for 3 minutes, 4 minutes. That's it. He get, even with his shallow latch, he gets so efficient at transferring the milk that in 4 or 5 minutes he's able to eat, and then is done for 2 hours, 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, until the next feeding. And that is part of that journey and that patience. So there is another side of that coin that I will not be completely honest if I don't share with you. All that was super hard, and then I, as a mom, pay two big prices. The big price, the first big price was the additional sleep deprivation that I was suffering, because instead of, like, a mom that was either putting formula or was not having issues with breastfeeding milk, that was going to be able to sleep for 2 hours and a half, 2 hours 40, I was actually only sleeping an hour and 50 minutes, an hour and 30 minutes maximum. So I paid that price of having higher levels of sleep deprivation. And the other one was that even when I know how bad refined sugars are for my mental health and for the mental health of anybody. I was so desperate on fixing my milk production that I was having every single option of lactation aids that you can imagine. I was having lactation cookies, lactation bread, lactation everything. And I was so focused on the breast milk that I lose sight of actually learning what I was putting in my body. And then that those two things were the worst combination for my body. I had the additional sleep deprivation, and then unfortunately, all those lactation products have as ingredient number one or ingredient number two sugar. And that is one of the worst things that you, as a new mom, as a brand new mom in postpartum in the fourth trimester, should have in your body, because your hormones are already all over the place. And all that sugar is just making it even harder for your hormones and your system to work properly. So what happened is I put those two together and kaboom, something explode. And then I struggle with postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety for the first months of my baby life. And it was a dark time. The fourth trimester for me was one of the times, if not the darkest time of my entire life, because I was having this duality in my mind all the time. I want to do what was right for the baby, what I feel that I want to do with breastfeeding, but also I was feeling all these the attachment and these issues with the anxiety and the postpartum depression, how bad I was feeling, how frustrated I was feeling, how tired I was feeling. And I want to be very clear with you that that was a price that I paid. I paid that those two prices, and they were very high. And I want sharing that with you, because one of the things that I want all of you mamas to know, and that I've been working lately with my moms, is to understanding that concept that we always pay a price. And as a mom, one of the things that I want for all of you is that you be confident on the price that you're willing to pay, that you don't pay a price that you are not willing to pay. And then it was rough for me, and it was super rough for my husband. Absolutely. Those were probably the hardest 3 months of our time together as a couple. And in hindsight, I am glad that I paid that price. I'm glad that I did that. And again, I will tell you one more time. I'm not saying that that is a price that every mom should pay. I'm also there for you, behind your back, cheering you up if you say that that price is too high of a price for you, and then that you prefer to go into other alternatives with your baby. That doesn't make you a less amazing mom. We all are amazing just because we are trying to do the best for our baby. And on those times, one of the things that helped me was thinking, am I doing the best that I can with what I have? I was frustrated because I want to do more. I didn't want to have all these problems, but I was aware that I was actually doing the best that I could with what I had, and that I was willing to pay some of that price. Talking about the postpartum anxiety and depression, we get to a point that I start talking with a psychiatrist into having medication. But around that time, I also remember what I knew about nutrition and what I knew about how refined sugar affect my brain and the brain of people. So what I decided to do was I decided to say, okay, I'm gonna first do what I know I can do that is in my control to improve the situation. And that was cutting all the refined sugar. So I throw away all the cookies, all the lactation sugars, everything that I was having to try to help with the milk, except the oats that I was having and the yeaster, brewer's yeaster, yeast. Everything else that had sugar, I turned it off. And then I went into a clean time of not having any sugar for 1 or 2 weeks. And then I immediately start feeling better. And then what also I did was I start adding three other things that were helpful for my mood and my postpartum depression and anxiety. The first one is I start having B6 vitamins. The other one is I start having 5-HTP vitamin supplements to make me feel better. And then this one was very important. I start going outside, even for 5 minutes, to get sunlight, to get sunshine. Because sometimes, if you are just feeding and sleeping the baby, you are in a room, locked in a room for days and days and days. So start getting outside, help a lot with that journey as well. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, I start feeling 80, 90% better. And then I choose to actually not have the medication. And this is another example of what I'm telling you, that there is not a right or wrong decision. If you need help, my suggestion with breastfeeding, with postpartum depression, with postpartum anxiety is, if you need help, find who can support you, find who can hold your hand, find who can give you different options and explore with you all those options, so you as a mama find the right choice, the right option for you and your baby. Because at the end, it's not matter of what the media is telling us that is the right thing to do, or that one mom is better than the other one because they did it differently. At the end of the day, you are loving your child, keeping your child alive, and finding a way to find yourself back and feeling that new you that is emerging as a mom, within everything else that you were as a woman before. So any decision that you take, it's the right decision for you and your family. And I want to be very clear with you on that one. I want you to have the information. I want you to know that you have alternatives always. And then I want you to, with your inner wisdom and your intuition, to choose what alternative and what option is the best one for you and your family. In motherhood, we don't have the right decision. We have the best decision at the time that we make the decision for us and our family. And with that one, I want to remind you of that tool that we talked several weeks ago. That is the brain tool. Use your brain. Then this tool is used for pregnancy, and when we are discussing options for birth with our medical team. And what I found out is I took that tool and bring it into the fourth trimester and after that in my motherhood journey. And I use that tool all the time. And that is, BRAIN is an acronym for asking ourselves and asking our team, what are the benefits of this option or this alternative? What are the risks? What are the alternatives? Because one thing that I learned as a mom is you always have an alternative. Even if people only present you one option, 99.9% of the time you have an alternative. E, I is, what is your intuition telling you? Going back into your mama instinct, going back into what your intuition is telling you. And then N is, what will happen if we don't do anything yet, if we wait? That is, if I go into my breastfeeding journey, I learned, like, okay, what are the benefits of breastfeeding? And I knew what are the benefits of breastfeeding. What are the risks? The risk was that my baby was not having enough and I was releasing weight and then it will get ill. Like, he was in the lower end of how much weight a baby can uh, release without being to the hospital. Then the alternatives were, okay, we can do a triple feeding and we can use the SNS and we can do some other supplement options to actually protect the baby, feed the baby, and then protect the supply. That was the alternatives. I was saying, my intuition was saying, I want to keep trying to breastfeed and I want to breastfeed my baby. And I listened to that intuition. And then what happened if nothing happened? And that is, I was not willing to rush my decision of stop my journey until 12 weeks that I knew that my milk was able. So that was my end on the brain. I was like, okay, I'm gonna try for these 12 weeks. And then if at that time I do not see progress and I see that is not happening, then at that time I will maybe change the course and change the trajectory and the decision that I'm making. And that is very important for us to know, because that tool in this part in motherhood is all about us embracing our own wisdom as moms, and knowing that that bond that you have with your baby, that relationship that you have with your baby, is been there since your baby start growing in your belly and you get pregnant. And then because of that, nobody knows better than you. And that is one of the biggest things that I feel sad for, and is that some I see so many moms second guessing themselves and second guessing their instinct because somebody with more expertise is telling them otherwise, because somebody with more experience is telling them otherwise. And one of my invitations in MOMFIT is to take advice from everybody, because as more information you have about benefits and risk and alternatives, as better. So take all the advice, take all the input, and then put it in a filter where you can actually filter out what works and what doesn't work for you and your baby, and feel empowered to know that the decision that you take is a decision that is going to support your journey in motherhood, support you and your baby. So I want to have this episode to actually be very raw and very vulnerable into my journey, because sometimes what we see in social media is we see the end result. We see the moms happy breastfeeding, or the moms just having formula, and a lot of the times nobody had the option to show us backwards what the journey was. So right now I am breastfeeding my baby, and I'm planning, as I was expecting, to breastfeed my baby for as long as he wants. We are going to be a year in a month and a half. And then I am doing that now. And now we don't have a problem. And now he eats and is gaining weight and is growing beautifully. And everything is great. And that was not the case all the time. The first 3 months of our breastfeeding journey were really hard. We had to fight for every ounce. We had to choose to not give up every day, every night. And I am sharing that, and I am opening myself to that part of the journey, because I want to inspire you, to let you know that there is always an option, to let you know that there is always an alternative, and to let you know that no matter what is your situation, you are not the first or the last mom to deal with it. You are not the first or the last mom to work on this situation. Uh, if you want to talk a little bit more about breastfeeding and your journey, and if for any reason you are struggling, I am here for you. Please reach out. Let's wanna make this happen if that is something that you want. And if there's not something that you want, let's gonna find a solution for you and your baby. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out http://spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it.